Welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle podcast. And today we're joined by a very special guest, one of our own, a Nottingham-born player. He started his career with Notts. He finished his career with Notts. In between, went on to be capped by Jamaica, appearances at Wembley. A warm welcome to Michael Johnson.
Hi, how are you, Paul?
Hey, I'm very well, Michael. You're one of that rare breed, a Nottingham boy. You started with Notts, you finished your career with Notts from the age of 17 through to 36. What does Notts County mean to you?
Notts will always have a special place in my heart. I mean, it was my first and last club. So Notts means an awful lot to me. The fans as well, I've got a great rapport with fans who have seen me grow as a young boy into the man that I later became. And to be given my first chance to put on the Notts County shirt, professional club shirt, I always remember it was one of great, great pride. So for me, Notts County will always hold a special place in my heart. I still look forward to the score lines even now. As a player, that was one of the first scores I used to look for when I left Notts County. And I'm always back, whether it's watching some of the games or just attending some of the events at Meadow Lane. So always will hold a special place in my heart.
Now, you're a Nottingham boy, born and bred, Clifton lad, and that's produced quite a few pro footballers down the years, hasn't it? Tell us a little bit about your childhood and some of those kickabouts with other quite famous Clifton football products.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of old boys that used to play down at Clifton, all whites there. There's the likes of Darren Huckabee, Jermaine Genius. We always used to have a kickabout. I remember Jermaine actually being in my house playing on my dartboard with my sister actually in when he was about 12, 13, and he wrecked my dartboard. So he still owes me for that dartboard, by the way. So when I see him, I'm going to ask him for the dough. But no,
Were the darts going in the walls then? They didn't make the dartboard.
All over the place, bar the actual board. No, but it was good times, really, really good times. And as a child growing up there, on Green Lane, and you rightly mentioned the football pitches going right across the just across the river there. It's a real wonderful place of just fun and developing your skills, and that's where I first started, as did Jermaine Genius, as did Darren Huckabee.
You came up through Notts' youth system, but you weren't straight in at 8, 9. It was a little bit later before you got spotted, yeah?
Yeah, I got spotted playing for Nottingham boys by Mick Walker and Russell Slade. So I have them to thank for plucking me out of Clifton, and it was great times. And people talk about the amount of games players play and youngsters play, but I remember back then you'd be playing probably 5 games a week. You'd play in the morning for City boys, you'd play in the afternoon for your local club, which would be Clifton All Whites. You played a Sunday morning for Notts County boys, and then you'd have a game during the week for school, and it was brilliant. And kick about with your mates as well. So, great memories and great times, Paul.
It didn't get much better in terms of making a club debut, did it? Neil Warnock gave you your club debut. Tell us a bit about that, because it was a decent place to make your debut, wasn't it?
Wasn't bad, was it? Highbury. I mean, it's balmy. You go from 1 minute as a 17-year-old. 2 years ago, a year ago, before that, you were probably collecting Panini stickers, and Ian Wright was obviously the record signing back then, 2.5 million. And fast forward, and 18 months later, you're walking out Highbury to go and mark him. So it's a great fairy tale story. But I always remember on the way down to the bus, and them days there, we used to have one of the YTSs do the fish and chip run. So basically, the young lad would take the orders from the senior pros, and then half an hour before the final whistle, you'd have to scarper off to get the fish and chips and put them on the box, and then put them on the bus for the senior pros. So, talk about recovery and nutrition now. That was your recovery and nutrition then in the early 90s. So I was going down as a fish and chip boy, and halfway down, Neil Warnock called me and said, look, Craig Short was having problems with a toe infection, and we brought you with us not only because we thought obviously you're deserving of the trip and we want you to look after the players, but just in case you couldn't make it, we wanted to give you your debut. What do you feel like? You feel okay? And I was kind of like stunned, as if to say, are you being serious? Because we're going to give you your debut today. So get yourself ready. You won't be doing the fish and chip shop run. You'll be marking Ian Wright. And that's how I found out about my debut. Against Arsenal with Ian Wright and Alan Smith up front. I think me and Lundy played at the back in the end because Yatesy had to go off with an injury. So you had a 17-year-old young boy and then striker Gary Lund playing at the back against Alan Smith and Ian Wright.
I mean, Neil was always under a huge reputation as a man manager, and I guess he didn't want to tell you the day or two before, did he? Because you'd have worried too much about it, yeah.
Absolutely. He played it spot on. You know, he waited till probably about an hour away from the ground and just quietly called me to the front of the bus and just asked me how I am and before breaking the news. And obviously, it's something that, as a young boy growing up in Clifton, you work so hard. You never envisaged yourself going to be playing at the top flight of English football at 17 years old at Highbury against, two Arsenal, England strikers, Alan Smith and Ian Wright. So for me, it was, I look back at it and it really is something that, you have to pinch yourself to believe.
So you've got a taste of the big league. You came in towards the end of that season, I think half a dozen games as the club was battling to stay up. Ultimately, it didn't stay up. But I guess some of the disappointment of relegation was tempered by the fact you were getting into that first team now, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember the games I played against Norwich, Coventry as well. And, you're travelling to some of the big grounds, Tottenham and Newcastle's. So for me, just to make my debut at the top flight of English football was an amazing thing for me. I never thought, it was going to be something that would happen so soon. And then to do it at 17 years old for your hometown club was great. And, some of the guys, some of the players, what were in that team, I can't speak fondly enough. And I still speak with them now. Such was the advice, the characters. It was a great bunch of lads. And unfortunately, we couldn't stay up at that season. But what a team, what a group of lads that was.
I mean, there were some great young players there. So Michael Johnson, that's you, obviously. Tommy Johnson, Mark Draper. You'd have been, just behind them in terms of coming through the youth ranks?
Yeah, so we all played in the same youth team, a really successful youth team. And obviously, Drapes and Tommy went just that year before me. And I was still, obviously, the second year as a scholar. YTS back then. So when I came in, they had obviously been in professional game a year, and they obviously really hit the ground running as well. I remember both players making England appearances at a really young age for the under-21s. So Notts had the core of a real strong, youth talent. Myself, Mark Draper came for obviously Tommy Johnson. I remember Dean Yates was still quite young back then as well. So there was some good young players. I don't know if you remember a lad called Steve Slawson who was breaking through.
Left-sided, strong left-sided player.
And we all had great hopes for Slawson, but it didn't quite work out. But it was a really talented squad.
A lot of that was down to Mick Walker, who ran Notts' youth setup very successfully for many years. He dates back to Jimmy Cyril, Howard Wilkinson era, doesn't he? You've obviously now moved into that side of things. Mick was obviously a great influence on you, presumably in many ways.
Yeah, Mick was quality. I mean, Mick was the one that offered me the opportunity to join up with the club. And I always remember when I first signed, he actually came round to my mum's house and sat down and took time out to say to my mum that we'd take care of him, we'll look after him, which I really, really even now still thank him for, just to give that level of detail and security to my parents. But then when I got there, just to see his discipline, I remember when we used to do our jobs, and my job was the away changing rooms, and I had to make sure that the showers and the change rooms were spotless. And what Mick used to do before you were dismissed, he used to say to everybody, when you finish, come and get me and stand by your job, literally stand by. And he would walk in and he would feel for the dust across the top of the coat hanger to see if there was any dust. The piping underneath the benches, he would stroke his finger along the pipe to keep you in the dust. Then he would go to the showers and make sure that, you know, there was behind the shower, the metal showers, that there was no dust. And what he was trying to do was trying to tell you that there's no easy route to success. If you're going to do it properly. And the same way you do your job is the same way you do the job on the pitch for me. And if you think you can cut corners, think again. And it was some of those great, like, you know, methods that I actually took with me into my playing career, which served me well. And he through doing our job, he implemented so much discipline and understanding that served me really well. So I've got a lot to thank Mick for. And, you know, besides that, he was a very tactical and tactically astute manager as well. You know, he managed the club as well. I thought he did really, really well.
Because that coincided that he took over as manager after Neil moved on, and so he was your senior manager as well.
Yeah, it was really interesting because obviously there was him and then later Russell Slade. And then to play with both of them guys that I'd obviously come through the youth setup with made me feel really comfortable. I was able to be really myself and be authentic. And they knew what I was capable of. And when I didn't, you know, reach those heights, you know, they were the first ones to give me a kick up the backside because they knew that, you know, Michael's capable of this. And I had a really good understanding that. And it was, for me at a young age, it allowed me to really develop in a comfortable environment.
The Mick Walker clearly helped you many, many times. Ups and downs, wasn't there? You had a season where you struggled and then bounced back the following season where there was almost a push for the playoffs, wasn't there?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned about that group, the character within the group, Paul, was immense. You know, you had real strong characters, people like Paul Harding, Alan Parrish, Charlie Palmer, Craig Short. And then you had the finesse of people like Tommy and Mark Draper. I remember Dean Thomas, you know, could literally peel an apple with his left foot. That's how talented he was. And then you had the raw exuberance of people like myself and a young Paul Devlin coming through. So what we had was the nutrients of a real tight knitted squad who, if you were going to beat us, we were going to take some rolling over. So even when we were disappointed about relegation, we always knew that if we had the fight and we stuck together, you know, whether the team stayed together, rather than everybody be sold, we knew that we'd have a great chance of getting back up.
Now, you mentioned fight there, and one of our upcoming guests is Paul Devlin. I gather he was one that you probably normally wanted on your five-a-side team in training rather than against.
He was miserable. I'm telling you now. I mean, he's my best mate, but if you didn't pass the ball to him on a five-a-side, he would literally, you know, start shouting, screaming, punching the floor, wanting to kick the opposition. He'd have a Barney with you back in the change rooms afterwards. He was just a winner. He was an out-and-out winner who was a real talented player. I mean, he went on to play for Scotland and in the Premier League with Birmingham and Sheffield United. So he was a good guy. I'll give you another funny story as well. He actually had a fallout with our old chairman, God bless him, Derek Pavis, and he brought a snake. And just to spite the chairman, I don't know if you remember, he nicknamed him Pavis. That was the name of the snake. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, he called the snake Pavis. Oh my God!
I do remember the snake. Now you've mentioned it. I remember there was an article about he kept a pet snake, didn't he? A big thing.
Yeah, he kept a pet snake and called him Pavis, which is unfair, really, because obviously Derek is an iconic figure at Notts County. We all know, but I think them two had a little falling out, which resulted in him leaving. But yeah, I mean, he was a real hot-headed player, and I remember several times me and him. He used to come in and he would want to argue. He'd want to throw boots around just because his team lost, not in a 11v11 non-proper game, but in a five-a-side game. So, yeah, that was Paul.
You had two, I would imagine, very entertaining, few nice trips to Italy. Anglo-Italian Cup runs, didn't you?
Yeah.
One you lost in the final to Brescia, Georgie Hagi.
Pressure. Yeah, George
And
Hadji.
then you won against Ascoli the following year. What were
Yeah,
they
that's
like?
yeah, it was great. I mean, to play at Wembley. I mean, I get, the hairs on the back of my neck stand up now when I think about, you coming out the tunnel at Wembley. For me, I'm just a lad of this estates in Clifton, Nottingham. So not only to pull on the shirt and play for Notts County, play in the top flight of English football, Arsenal, then to go to Wembley twice. I mean, it was an amazing couple of days. Amazing for the fans as well, And I always say to people now that I played in Europe, and you go, where did you play? Was it the UEFA? Was it the European? I'm like, no, in the Anglo-Italian Cup for Notts County. So, but it is, I've still got the 2 medals, 1 winner's medal and 1 loser's medal. So it's, for me, great.
Because Hagi was kind of like European Player of the Year. I mean, our older viewers and listeners like me, he was kind of one of the top players in the world. Coming to the end of his career, but presumably it was quite enlightening just to see him up close and personal, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, Hagi was a special player. I remember him being tipped. I think it was the 80 or 90 World Cup. He was tipped as one of the stars of the World Cup. In along the likes of your Maradona. So he was talked about really highly. And I think in the other final, we played against a lad, I don't even remember, called Thomas Scaravi, who was another player who played in the World Cup, and everybody was talking about him. So, whilst, the Anglo-Italian Cup was probably not the highlight of, many European competitions, what I would say, it gave us an opportunity to mix and mingle with some of the top players in Europe.
Did you have some good trips to Italy as well in the earlier rounds?
Fantastic trips. I still remember one where me and Sean Gota went across Europe. I forgot where it was actually. Well, obviously, it's over in Italy, but I forgot where it was where we went. And we actually went into the marketplaces and, brought quite a few bits and bobs. And then I remember one of the pictures I've got, and I've still got it now up on my wall, where there's about 15 of us all hugged together. Myself, Phil. Remember Phil King?
Yeah.
Phil King, Sean Gota, Dave Robinson, those sort of players all enjoying the day after the game, where we had a nice little meal, a nice little lunch before coming back to the East Midlands.
Very good, very good. All good things come to an end, but for you, it was a great move to Birmingham, and you then went on to have a very, very successful career. You got capped by Jamaica as well, didn't you? 12, 13 times?
Yeah, I mean, I never wanted to leave Notts, but it just seemed inevitable that, the club wanted to take the money from Birmingham, and it's not far from home. So I ended up going down the M42 and had 9 great years there. But then obviously, as you said, got capped for Jamaica, which was something that I never would have dreamed of. And it was really, really a fantastic time for me personally, to go and play for Jamaica, to go and play against, Brazil and Italy and, some of the top teams in Mexico. And I realised probably, when I was 26, 27, the opportunity to maybe represent England might have gone. So when Jamaica came calling, which they did, I took it, and it was fantastic. To travel and play against some of the best talent around the world was brilliant.
But of course, like a homing pigeon, you came back, didn't you? You came back towards the end of your career. The first bit was a loan stint from Derby, wasn't it? And clearly, the Notts County you came back to was playing in a very different standard to the one that you previously left. What was that like? Was it just good to come home? Because clearly they were poles apart, weren't they?
Yeah. A lot of people don't know this, Paul, but it was probably the highlight of my career.
Really?
The most important, yeah. I remember at the time, I was probably 35 and I had a real successful loan stint to Sheffield Wednesday. And Ian McParland and Dave Kevin and Tommy Johnson said to me, look, the club's real danger going out of the league. And at that time, I just had an opportunity to go and get another championship club. But I knew I was coming towards the end, Paul. And they said to me, listen, we really could do with your help. And we know that, you're looking for a club. There's Notts County, your home club. There's a potential of the youth system setting up in 18 months to a year's time. But we need your help, Michael. And I went home and thought about it. And I decided to turn down the lure of going to another championship club. Twice the wages, Paul.
Really?
Because the club needed help. And that first season there, near Charlie, we nearly went with, I don't know if you remember it, we saved off relegation into non-league. And so with all the emotion of that decision and actually achieving it, it was something that I really, really looked upon as, probably one of the highlights of my career. Not a lot of people know it because it didn't come with silverware. Usually people say, oh yeah, I've won the league or promotion. And there has been those highs and lows. But for me to put my career on pause at that particular moment and go back to Notts County and achieve staying up. And I remember that final day where the fans were absolutely, going bananas with themselves. It was really up there.
Well, I didn't know that. I'm sure most Notts fans don't know that. But me personally, I'm sure all Notts fans would say a huge thank you, because I would possibly suggest that if you'd not come back, we would have probably dropped out. We would have probably dropped out because it was a close run thing last game of the season, wasn't it?
It was touch and go. And I know Charlie and Dave, Kevin and Tommy were all, besides themselves. And, we had some real frank discussions before I actually agreed to come. And that's why it kind of gripes upon me, where we are now. But I'm open that, this weekend it might, start the change of something special again. But yeah, it was for me a real poignant moment that when I came back and, I enjoyed the following year before I actually put my boots up and retired.
Yeah, because I think there's a line, isn't it? I've seen it in some newspaper articles from Arsenal, where you made your debut, to Dagenham and Redbridge, the last game. That's kind of the full spectrum of the Football League, isn't it?
Yeah, who would have thought it? It's madness, isn't it? You make your debut at Arsenal and you retire at Dagenham. And listen, I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think the missing piece there was he's made his debut for Notts County and retired in Notts County. But what it showed was I think that the fall to grace of a fantastic club, a club that should nowhere be in where it is. We're the oldest football club in the world, and to be flitting around where we are now, hopefully, let's try and see if the next 5 years or so, the club can get back to where it should be.
Yeah, I mean, because my son's 23 now. All his mates, they're Notts fans. They have their own Sunday morning team, Shire Athletic, they're called.
Yeah.
But the highlights for that generation is, one League Two title with the Munto money.
Yeah.
That's it, and everything else, Notts,
Nah.
or almost perceived as a bottom tier team. But you obviously look a hell of a lot younger than me. But I mean, I'm 57 now. But I grew up, and Notts County were in the top two divisions of English football all the time. And even when Forest won those European Cups, Notts managed to claw their way into the top flight and then beat them fairly regularly in the top flight. They don't like reminded of that. But my point is Notts were a top two division tier team, and they had a lot of quality players, many of whom you would have played alongside. And the generation before you, the Harcooks, Don Massons, Trevor Christie's, Ian McCullochs, were all quality players in their own right.
No, you're spot on. I remember watching Notts like early 80s, and they were always in and around top flight clubs. In fact, I know my history here. I know in the mid 60s, Notts were the bigger club than Nottingham Forest.
Yeah,
they were punching far bigger than Nottingham Forest. And I remember actually, I think it was 92, so Charlie Palmer Day.
Yes.
When we actually played Nottingham Forest, and I actually played in that, and we beat them. So we were in and around, the top flights of English. I'm not going to say we were always at the top, First Division 1, but never ever loitering where we were and where we are now. and to see obviously the club, and then like, as you said, my kids can't fathom that we were once, you know, up at the top table of English football. And I try and tell them that, they're like, "No, Dad, that's not right." So I have to try and go in the archives to show them.
Yeah. It will turn. Football's a cyclical business. It's going to turn. You mentioned Sir Charlie Palmer Day. That was a great occasion. And I'd forgotten Peter Reid was playing for Notts that day, wasn't he? And I was talking to him about it, and he said he really enjoyed the short time he was there, enjoyed the club, and he spoke to me about that game very fondly. What was it like to play in?
Absolute ledge. Peter Reid was coming towards the back end of his career there. I think he'd left Man City to come, actually.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, he was a big player. Obviously, England World Cup. So to have him in your ranks, it was unbelievable. I remember for me, he was, you know, brilliant on the ball, tigerish. He was a little tiger in the middle of the park. And I remember in that game against Nottingham Forest, and obviously Roy Keane had played in that game as well. So it was quite a bitey midfield there. But you know, Peter Reid was brilliant, and obviously Howard Kendall came as well. So you know, the Everton duo did really well for Notts County in the early 90s.
They were good times. They were good times. You had an immense career as a player, and you've been fortunate. Fortunate's the wrong word. You've worked hard to establish a career in management and coaching with Guyana, and now you are with the England under-21s. Clearly, there's been a lot of debate in recent times. Black Lives Matter, the whole scenario of BAME people having an opportunity, being given a chance to coach or manage. You know, we both know Darren Moore, one of the I think a wonderful man, known him for many years, top guy. He's currently at Doncaster, but it's something like 3 or 4 Bama people in the whole of the 92 professional football club setup. You have first-hand experience. Give me, as best you can, your experience or your views on this whole subject.
Yeah, it's a sensitive one if you don't if you don't grasp. It's not that anybody's saying that just because you're of ethnicity that you should get a job. And that's the first thing I want to say. But there's clear disparities between black and white coaches getting opportunities. I think there's about 4% now of the 92 jobs are going to people of ethnicity at the top management positions. And when you delve into in boardrooms and governing bodies, you're talking less than 1%. But here we are, got a game that is, you know, enjoyed by probably 30% of BME. So what is quite clearly showing you is that, you know, once your playing days are over, the opportunities to acquire managerial coaching positions, boardroom positions, senior leadership positions are very few and far between. So there's it's like a glass ceiling, Paul, which, you know, there's a denial of opportunity. And I've come up against that where I've sent numerous CVs into clubs without any real success. And what we're trying to say is, and you know, this you go back to the Rooney Rule. What the Rooney Rule is trying to say is that in your recruitment process, there must be one person of ethnicity within that recruitment process. So if you're interviewing 5 candidates, just make one person who's qualified from a ethnicity point of view. Now, you might want to say you want to choose 3, 4, 5, the best people for the job. And that's what it should be. It should just be about the best people for the job. But we quite clearly know this is not the case. So how do we try and change this? And there's other environments. I remember Lord Davis wrote a report in 2011 about women on boards. And he wrote a code that suggested that there should be now a target of 25% of women on FTSE boards by 2015. Well, the number was surpassed by 2015. So what we're trying to say is that unless there's some kind of code or radical change, then the numbers won't change to allow people of ethnicity the opportunity where their skill sets deserve to get into those positions.
I think we should also point out, Michael, you've done this the right way, gone about this the right way. I think you took, was it a sporting masters in Manchester?
Yeah, yeah. So I've done the UEFA's Masters for international players. So I had to go all around Europe for 2 years. So now I've got a master's degree for sporting director. I did a sporting directorship with Manchester University for 2 years. So I now have 2 master's degrees. I also did the League Managers Association diploma for 2 years. So I've now got a diploma. I've also got an accreditation in senior governance. So now I've passed in governance. And then I've got all my youth academy coaching qualifications, and I'm a pro licensed coach as well. So I made sure for that, first and foremost, if I'm going to talk about it, I need to talk about it from a position of strength. And also it gives me a lot of confidence when I'm going into a interview process that, I'd like to think my CV backed up with my playing background makes me a strong candidate for a role.
I think that's very impressive, because sometimes uneducated people will say, well, they've not studied for the proper qualifications, etc. You clearly have got everything you need to do to be successful. But even with all those, it's not been easy for you, has it?
No, it's not. It's not been easy, and you come against certain ceilings that you're trying to break through. But I look at life like this, Paul. That I behave and conduct as a sporting director because I have to. I do not allow perception to rule the way I conduct myself. So if you're not going to give it, I will award it to myself. So I will, when I walk out the house, I will dress, I will speak, I will articulate myself in a way that is accustomed to a director of football, because that's the position that I've given myself to allow me to act, to perform, to watch football at the level that I know that I can act, watch, and perform football at. And it's the way that I've had to do it because the positions aren't forthcoming. So I can't wait forever to somebody to give it. And so I've made the real decision to take control of my own destiny by doing me, and wherever that leaves me, then I'm fine with that.
There's a young Notts fan. He lives quite close to me and my son, and he was subject of some racist abuse, Brandon, and that went across the media. And it was good to see lots of the Notts County players got involved. And
I've seen that, yeah.
Yeah, he's a good lad, Brandon. He's a good lad, and clearly he's had a tough time of it. But it's great to see that he's sticking to Notts County, and it was good to see the Notts County players rallying around as well.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I think it's applaudable from the Notts lads to really encourage and motivate him. And it's sad that in this day and age, we've seen we've seen the likes of Cyril Regis and the stuff that Justin Fashanu had to put up with in the late 70s, and Viv Anderson, and you kind of think the game's moved on, and it has moved on. I mean, it's there's isolated incidents like what Raheem Sterling faced last year, but so I think the game's now moved on from what happens on the football field. It's a lot more diverse now on the playing field, but now I think the baton's now been passed on to go and challenge the thought process that black coaches, managers, footballers transitioning are not capable of holding leadership positions.
Talk to us a little bit about Guyana. I mean, that must have been, in many respects, a wonderful time. I mean, you'd have been clocking up the air miles, if nothing else, wouldn't you?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was, again, an opportunity that came maybe because I didn't get the opportunity here. So when the opportunity came to manage a country, I jumped at it. And, to go to places like Brazil, Suriname, to qualify for the Gold Cup. And for those that don't know, the Gold Cup's like the Euros. And our first game was against United States of America. And it was fantastic, this game was beamed right across the world. And what was funny was our most expensive player was a 36-year-old Neil Dans, who had no value, but he was probably the most well-known player. And there we are playing against America, littered with stars. And one of their players was £52 million Pulisic, who's now at Chelsea. And so when we stood there, it was like that David and Goliath moment that we'd qualified for the Gold Cup. But it was an amazing experience to learn a different culture, to learn that, number one, I can do it after all these qualifications, which it kind of verified that, you know what, you can do it. And it was great to give something to football on a global scale, because I've always wanted to give back. And so to give back to a country and leave them in a better position than when you first arrived is special.
Tell us a little bit about your England role, under-21, St George's Park, just down the road from you. It seems like a dream job in a dream location.
Absolutely. I mean, I missed it as a player to represent England. But to get there as a coach, for me, equally is exciting. You know, when you hear that national anthem and you stand there with your 3 lines on your chest, and it's an amazing feeling. And to be in amongst all the talent and to be learning from Gareth, from Lee Carsley and Adi Buford, it's an amazing thing. And to come in with the best players in England, whether it's senior or the 21s. So for me, I've learned so much from an experience. I'm one of the coaches, so I obviously assist Lee Carsley and Adi Buford with the 21s. Unfortunately, we're lost out in the Euros this month, and obviously this summer, and the under-21s lost out in the Toulon. So I didn't manage to attend a major tournament, but I'm hoping that I'll be around for long enough to try and get to a major tournament next year with the 21s.
I went as a fan to the under-21s in Italy, probably a year or so ago now. And when you, for those major tournaments, the quality of English players at that age group, there are some top names there, isn't there? It must be great to be able to get to work with that level of talent.
Oh, it's unbelievable. You know, you're working with likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, Mason Greenwood, Phil Foden, Reece Nelson. There's some real talent. You know, I'm scratching my head here because I'm thinking there's no way in the next 2 World Cups should we not be a major part to play in it. Such is the talent that we have. So I'm excited about the way that English football is going in the youth and the development of youth. You look at Jude Bellingham, who today has gone to Borussia Dortmund. Jadon Sancho so we've got some of our best young players at some of these best clubs in the world, getting exposure to Champions League and European events, which can only stand you in good stead for when the World Cup and the Euros come around.
Heavily involved in coaching and developing young players. We spoke a little bit earlier about Mick Walker, legend at Notts. Did you learn much from him that you try and put into practice in the modern day?
Yeah, absolutely. You always try and take away bits from managers and coaches and try and get something somewhere near your own kind of ideology of how you would do things. But I always dip back and think, okay, how did I feel when I was 17, 18, 19? And if I felt like that in the moment, what did the coach, Mick Walker or Russell Slade, do or say? And sometimes it can be you learn not to do it. So you always learn, because you might say, well, that wouldn't be the best way I'd do it because I felt like this. But actually, a lot of my thinking about how they dealt with young players has really formed who I am today as a coach.
Okay, that's brilliant. We always ask our guests to put together, you might not know this, they're the best five-a-side team from the Notts players in there. So I'm presuming...
That I played with?
Yeah, that you played with. Wow. So while you were at Notts, your dream five-a-side team?
I'm telling you, know what, because I obviously scaled two eras.
Yeah, you just need to find a place for Paul Devlin, don't you, whilst you're in trouble?
Oh, hey, he'll be kicking me over the... If he's not in this team, I'll get a call. That I can guarantee you. Well, so...
Who'd you have in goal?
Okay. So
who'd you have in goal?
It would have to be Steve Cherry.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to pick myself here. You're not allowed to pick yourself.
No.
So, my two centre backs would have to be Craig Short and Dean Yates.
Yeah, yeah.
Charlie Palmer's going to kick me as well, by the way. I can't win. Midfield for me, you got to go Mark Draper and Paul Devlin. And then up top on their own would have to be Tommy.
That's a good team.
That's not bad, by the way.
That's a good team.
Yeah.
And Notts, do you remember that Masters tournament? He used to be on the telly. And Notts were rubbish in it all the time, weren't they?
I remember.
I think one year Tommy played and we won it or something. Then the following year he was playing for Aston Villa. Couldn't believe it. Hey, did you play for Birmingham City?
Yeah, I was at Birmingham, yeah. they offered him more money, so he jumped ship.
Just what general point. You know, you picked out Craig Short and Dean Yates, and they were two iconic, strong 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" centre halves. You know where I'm going here.
Yeah.
You're a quality player, mostly centre half rather than left back.
Yeah, I agree.
But you didn't necessarily fit the stereotype of a British League centre half. Talk to me about that, because clearly, you know, your heading ability, your leap's legendary. Is that something you had to learn to compensate because you weren't 6'3"? How did you go through all of that?
It's really detailed to break down, and it would involve you going on a training field, because there's so many things that I used to do that would take the power away from the stereotypical number 9.
Yeah.
So it might be putting your body certain ways. It might be running up at a certain angle. It might be letting him not know where you are. So is Michael coming from the left-hand side, the right-hand side? Is he starting in front of him? So there's so many nuances that I learned to be able to defeat players, 6'5", 6'4", and as you said, majority of my career was known for my spring, but it wasn't only the spring. There was also some real technicalities about how you get the better of people that are 5, 6, 7 inches taller than you, and I always knew I was quick, so I'd always feel confident going toe to toe with, you know, whether it's somebody who was quick or somebody that was 6'5". And majority of the times, you know, even when I played with taller players like Darren Moore, and managers would always say to me, Michael, you grab the bigger lad. Because they knew that majority of the times, you know, I was blessed with a real good spring.
There weren't so many centre halves not that tall in stature. I mean, I remember Chris Perry at Wimbledon always used to do very well, didn't he? Chris Perry, Wimbledon and Tottenham. Of course, closer to home as a predecessor, Pedro. You know, but Pedro was kind of a different centre half. He was really an out and out sweeper when he played under the Howard Wilkinson regime. You know, whereas you would attack the ball as well, wouldn't you? You know.
Yeah, I think nowadays, I would definitely be one to attack the ball. As I got older, I'd learned not to attack so much, and basically just get yourself in good positions on the field. And I think the game's changed now. I think the game has got to an area where, you know, there's a lot less emphasis on the size of players. So if you watch the Premier League and the Championship, majority of the time now, you get, you know, teams playing out from the back. You get inverted wingers now. So wingers ain't going down the line as much as they used to. They want to come infield and want to pull the ball back. Whereas before, in my day, you'd get, you know, chalk on your boots, as they'd say, and you would stand it up at the far post for, you know, the big 6'4", whether it be a Devon White or a Gary Lunn kind of player coming in. So the game's changed, and I see a lot more emphasis now, more on tactically astute and a lot more ball-playing centre-backs, as opposed to, as you rightly said, you know, the Dean Yateses, even though Yatesy could play, by the way, your Dean Yateses and your Craig Shorts.
Michael, been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We'll let you do some research for the under-21s or whatever it is you're up to at the minute. Some great stories, great banter. I'm sure Paul Devlin, who will be appearing after you, will have something to say.
Oh, no, not after me. Please, no. Tell him I've been nice to him because he's going to call me up afterwards. You got to mention the snake. That's what you got to say to him.
And a lovely story, a lovely story. And I think also, again, on behalf of myself and all Notts County fans, didn't fully understand or appreciate the circumstances that he turned down to come back to Notts. You know, and I think it's a very sobering thought. If you had not come back, we would have probably been relegated into the conference then. You know, so I thank you for that. It's great that you still have such an affinity for Notts County, and as your children grow up, I hope in a few years' time they can start to recognise Notts County, as you and I did when we were growing up, as a team that's in the top two divisions of English football rather than in the lower regions. So, Michael, thank you very much indeed. It was great to trip down Meadow Lane. Look forward to catching up soon.
Take care. Pleasure. God bless you.
Thank you.